Yeah, welcome to the Making of Me podcasts, where we explore the moments, decisions, and challenges that have shaped us into who we have become. Today's guest is Rodney Phillips, author of Dissension, a disagreement that lead to discord. Rodney's stories span decades, from starting his manuscript at 19, shelving it for over 37 years, to finally publishing it after turning 56. His journey reflects resilience, timing, and power of choice, exploring how one disagreement can ripple into profound consequences. It's really a pleasure having you on the show, Philip.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on the show. I truly appreciate it, and
Yeah,
I'm excited to talk to you about it.
yeah, thank you so much. So, Rodney, looking back, what's earlier experience or events first shape your view of loyalty, trust, and human relationship?
Yeah, so an interesting story with this book is obviously you had mentioned that I started writing it at 19, right? So
Yeah.
I think the ending and the way that the story would have went wouldn't be as deep as it is now if I didn't have it sit in my file cabinet for 37 years and then infuse my life experience back into it. And, between my work and leadership opportunities I had with that, and then also I have done a lot of coaching for over 20 years in
Mm,
multiple sports, American football, lacrosse, both boys and girls. I think a lot of that leadership had played a part in the characters, as far as exploring disloyalty with one of the cartels and loyalty, like blind loyalty, I call it, with the other cartel, because they might not even agree with what the leader's doing, but they just follow along,
yeah.
So I think that has helped to infuse that information back into the book, which is why it's receiving so much positive feedback.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Thank you for sharing. So what challenge or period in your life push you to make significant decisions about pursuing your writing seriously?
Yeah. So the reason why this happened is I'm no longer coaching. Both my kids went to
Mm,
college and I work full time, but on the weekends I used to coach all day. I'd leave early in the morning, I'd be gone all day. And now with me not coaching, my wife is like, "What? You have to find like a hobby, you got to do something." I said, "Well, maybe I'll pull my book out." And she said, "You mean all those notebooks that are piled up in our file cabinet?" I said, "Yeah." So that's what kind of sparked me to pull it back out. And I got to tell you, one thing that I'm extremely proud of is everything that I had handwritten, I typed into the computer, because obviously when I started this book, we
yeah,
didn't have computers.
yeah,
Everything was handwritten. So I started the foundation from that. And then I started to write and change and add things and upgrade the story with like cell phones and fentanyl and some other things that we didn't have in the 80s.
yeah.
But yeah, so that's really what sparked it, was my wife saying, "Hey, find something to do. You're driving me crazy."
Wow, wow, that was really amazing. Read that. The book has been there, but like still on the shelf for like 37 years, and you having to revisiting it, and having to type every single thing personally. And I think there would have been a whole lot of emotions going through. Yeah,
Yeah,
going through your
yeah,
mind. Eh?
unbelievable. Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's really cool because of the fact that what authors really take a book and let it sit aside for 37 years,
mm,
right? They might put it aside for a year, maybe 2 years,
yeah,
but really untouched for that long of period of time. And it was really cool for me to then read what I'd written at 19,
yeah,
so it's almost like it's written by two authors, right? It was
yeah,
me at 19 years old with my mindset then, and then me at 56
yeah.
with all this life experience. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's a really neat, interesting backstory on it.
Yeah, amazing. So were there moments where you question whether completing or publishing the book what was worth it or what made you push forward?
It was actually the feedback that I had received.
Mm,
So after I finished the book, my wife and I are avid readers, and we have a bunch of friends that like to read. So I ended up giving it to probably my wife and maybe like five other people. And they all read it. They all loved it. They loved the characters and they loved the story. So my wife and I were talking, and we're like, well, let's send it out, see what happens. And I actually went on to ChatGPT and I had it run me a query of what publishing companies in the United States take new authors with new ideas. It only came back with 4. So we ended up sending the manuscript to all 4. The first one turned it down within a 24-hour period. So I don't even know between you and I if they actually read the book. And then the other 3 wanted it. So then I ended up doing virtual calls like you and I are doing now and talked to the different publishers. And then we decided to go with one and been on this journey since February of 2025. And the book actually launched September 16th of 2025. So it's been out for maybe about 5 months-ish.
Yeah, amazing. Wow, that was really lovely. So how?
Yeah, another cool add-on onto that is in April, I was doing a virtual call with the 3 girls that were editing the book at the publisher.
Mm,
And they said, hey, we have a really good rapport with you, so I'm just going to say this. And I thought that they were going to tear me apart, right? Because I'm a new author,
yeah.
the whole 9 yards. And they're like, we love your story. We love your characters. Do you have a sequel? So I actually started writing a sequel in April. So I'm about 85 or so chapters into that. But I only write on the weekends. So my wife calls me the weekend writer.
Yeah.
Full time.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing.
so I've been working on the sequel as well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. So how did your career experience in the pharmaceutical industry shape your perspective on conflict, choice, and human behavior?
Yeah, so I think it shaped a lot of my perspective and, my writing in general because of the fact that, you're exposed to a lot of different leaders, you're exposed to a lot of different, situations. And one of the big things that I think, in Dissension that comes to light is how important communication is. So in Dissension, you have 2 cartels that were at peace for a long period of time. Happens, which I'm not going to give away the book, but something happens to trigger that peace and create the dissension, right? That then creates, the disagreement, which then it spirals out of control from there. But communication is really the key to that. And the communication, in my mind, is the key to any situation. Working with colleagues in the pharmaceutical industry, communication is huge. Working with physicians in the pharmaceutical industry is huge. Marriage communication is huge, right? You have to communicate with your spouse in order to make things work, right? So unfortunately in the book Dissension, communication was broken down. They didn't communicate. So then this disagreement, kind of spiraled out of control.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you for sharing. So when writing about loyalty, betrayals, and moral conflicts, how do you translate real life experience into a character choice?
Yeah, so I think we're all faced with moral dilemmas, right? On a daily basis, I guess you'd say. But, as far as loyalty and disloyalty, I think it stems to the leader, right? And in the book Dissension, the one cartel, as I mentioned, they're kind of blindly loyal to their leader, even though they really might not, everybody, all the subordinates might not agree with the direction that they're taking. They're kind of blindly loyal and just, kind of following along. On the other side, I pursued the opposite. So with the other cartel, I pursued disloyalty, which is, one of the main reasons why the disagreement ends up happening was, the subordinates were disloyal to the leader, and unbeknownst to him, he didn't know that they were disloyal, so that kind of helps to propel that story forward. But I thought it was interesting to pursue those 2 different sides of the coin, if you will, with both cartels, because it gave me the opportunity to really look at, if you think of the cartels as teams, look at 2 teams, what's happening with the leadership on one team and what's happening with the leadership on the other team. And then I was able to pursue that a lot deeper, and obviously with me being a coach for a long period of time in multiple sports, that teamwork and communication and loyalty, disloyalty all plays into
Yeah,
that.
yeah, amazing, amazing. How did your journey in coaching? How did it get started?
Yeah, so I started recruiting first for high school when I was really young. I recruited for a American football team for a high school, and I would go to the opponents that they would face the following week and really like scout. And then I started getting into coaching, and then I actually coached at a larger school near us. I was their defensive coordinator, all in youth. Most of my coaching experiences in youth. I did have a lot of scouting for like high school, but so I became a defensive coordinator. And then some of my friends, while their kids were playing, I was their defensive coordinator for like 10 years. And then when my kids started to become the age of playing, then I was a defensive coordinator on football, and then I was a head coach for both girls and boys lacrosse. So, basically love coaching.
Yeah,
One of the things that I would tell all my young athletes is how important feedback is.
yeah,
Because to me, feedback is a gift. And if somebody gives you feedback, whether it's positive or negative, you should listen to it. And one of the things, in athletic journey is, everybody has an opportunity area. None of us are doing everything perfect, right?
yeah,
Whether that's footwork or hip turn or, technique, whatever that you're working through, listen, right? Listen to the feedback, because I'm only trying to help you, right?
yeah.
Once you get better, and practice makes perfect. So to me, feedback is such a key, because it's such a gift in anything that you do.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for sharing.
Second.
If you had to identify one challenge that shaped your approach to storytelling, what will it be?
Yeah, I would say the biggest challenge that shaped my storytelling is the character development, because I really wanted real world characters. And what I mean by that is characters that have flaws, have bad habits,
Yeah,
not this perfect character, right? So each one of my characters, I really spent a lot of time with. I created these sheets where, simple things like hair color, eye color, height, weight, are in there. But then I went farther to, well, what bad habits do they have? What flaws do they have? What positive traits do they have? What negative traits do they have? So then when I was writing those characters, I tried to put myself in the seat of them. How would they react, right? Are they going to be, brash and aggressive type character in a situation, or are they going to be more strategic and thoughtful about what is happening? So I really spent a lot of time on the character development. And one of the authors that I followed a lot growing up and read, I think every one of her books, was
yeah.
Patricia Cornwell. And she really develops her characters. I mean, to the point where you could almost close your eyes and picture what they look like and how
Ooh,
they would act. She's really, I think, a big influence on me on that character development. But to be quite honest with you, I don't think I would have developed these characters that deeply at 19 years old. Right. So if I would have finished this book completely at 19
yeah,
and didn't go back and work on it, because I put a lot of extensive work into the characters, so I would say that's probably the biggest
yeah,
challenge, is making sure that those characters are real. Because in my mind, nobody, this is my opinion, but nobody wants to read about this perfect person, right? Because
yeah,
I don't think a perfect person exists, So,
yeah,
so that's,
yeah.
my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's lovely. Yes, not everyone is not perfect. Yeah, definitely there's some side of it. It's owing to this particular imperfection sometimes that even attract us to each other. We speak volumes to the fact that yes, at
Yep.
the end of the day, at the core, we are just similar with with different imperfection here and there. And yeah, it's amazing, it's amazing. Also, lastly, looking back at Rodney, what lessons do you hope readers and listeners take away about the ripple effect of decision, disagreements, and other choices we make?
I would say I'll echo what I said earlier about the importance of communication.
Mm,
I think, everything that we do, everything that we, exist with, I think at the root of it is communication. Because I feel like if you have a disagreement with somebody, just talk about it, communicate about it. Because, and listen, be able to listen to the other person, right? Because if you're not listening and you're just telling them your side of the
Yeah.
equation and you're not open to what their thoughts are, I think that I think that's important, and I think it's important in life in general, just to listen to the other person and communicate and be open about it. And people say, oh, you need to have tough skin. I don't think it's necessarily that you have to have tough skin. I just think that you have to be open to other people's ideas, and just be able to talk through things, And I'll give you a funny example of the sequel that I'm working on. So I had this scene or chapter, let's say, where I have all the law enforcement getting together and they're supposed to be doing this like retreat. So they were going to go to dinner and then they were going to have like a conference and work through, some of the things that they found on the cartels and stuff and share ideas basically. So I rewrote that chapter of the dinner scene at least 15 times, moving characters around in seats. Like I have this drawing where I would, move a character from this seat to this seat and who they're sitting next to each other. Because if you think about it, you go to dinner and there's like 12 people at a dinner, okay? You and I are just meeting each other and becoming good friends, right? So our conversation at that dinner table is going to be totally different than maybe two other characters down at the other side of the table that know each other and have worked together for years, right? Their conversation is totally different. But I leaned on my work experience where typically if you go to like a regional meeting or a national meeting or any type of business meeting, you typically have the meeting first or the conference first, and then you go to dinner. And I had it in the book reversed. But by leaning on my experience, I flipped it. And then that dinner scene became easier to write because any disagreements or reductions or anything like that, I got out of the way at the meeting, which is typically what happens at a business meeting, right? So by just leaning on my experience, I was able to fix those chapters,
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Rodney. Yeah, this has
Yeah.
really been amazing. Also, for my audience who love to connect with you or to read your book or either for your coaching sections, how can they reach out to you and where is the best platform?
Yeah, so they can reach out to me on my website, which is Rodney Phillips author. Or feel free to have some of your listeners send me an email if anybody's interested in writing and they want to bounce some ideas off me or anything like that. I'm always open to helping people and discussing, but it's rphillips66@yahoo.com. So they can reach out to me via email and ask me questions. And it's funny, I have some, after going on this author journey, I have some friends that are like, hey, I had an idea. Can we get together and have coffee or whatever? I'm like, absolutely. Let's grab coffee and talk about it, because I think a lot of people have ideas, but they don't know how to really get started, So those would be the two biggest places. And obviously, from our discussion that the book's available pretty much everywhere that you could buy books, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Google Play, Apple Books, all of those different places and platforms.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Rodney Philip. I think your story just speaks volumes to the fact that, yes, a whole lot could actually get to happen, and the fact that you actually started your work at 19th and having, after 37 years, having to complete it, shape a whole lot of things, being that the character was not different, being that you have a larger perspective. And yeah, it's really amazing, especially in communication, loyalty, and everything. Yeah, it was really a pleasure having you on the show. Really.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I really appreciate you inviting me to be on the show, and great to meet you, and hopefully we'll stay in touch, and maybe you'll have me back on when the sequel launches.
Yeah, definitely, that would be lovely. And for my audience who would love to connect with Rodney, check the show notes and you see the link to his websites and maybe one or two of his social media so that you can actually reach out. Once again, it's a pleasure and honor to have you on the show.
Yep, thank you, buddy.